Hey everyone, welcome back to AITAH Chronicles. If you're new here, I'm so glad you found us. We're building an amazing community and we're on our way to 10K subscribers. So make sure you hit that subscribe button and join us for the wildest Reddit stories you'll hear today. Now, before we jump in, imagine this. Your boyfriend of 3 years comes to you one day and says he wants to open up the relationship. You're skeptical, but you agree. Fast forward 6 months, and you're thriving, going on dates, meeting new people, living your best life. Meanwhile, he's got nothing. And when I say nothing, I mean 0 dates, 0 matches, complete radio silence. So what does he do? He goes through your phone without permission, sees that you've got over 500 matches, and absolutely loses it. But here's the kicker. He admits he only opened the relationship because he wanted to date a younger coworker and leave you for her. Plot twist? She rejected him. Yeah, you can't make this stuff up. That's our first story today, and trust me, it gets even messier. But we've also got 4 more unbelievable situations lined up, a Lunchbox saga that'll have you questioning people's common sense, a workplace showdown that ended with multiple firings, and so much more. So grab your headphones, get comfortable, and let's dive into today's stories. Oh, and stick around until the end because I want to hear your take on these in the comments. All right, let's get into it. Am I the asshole? Boyfriend opens relationship, gets 0 play, then throws tantrum. Okay, so buckle up because this story is absolutely chef's kiss in the most chaotic way possible. We've got a 37-year-old man who really thought he did something here. And spoiler alert, he did not. So the writer starts off telling us she's been with her boyfriend for just over 3 years. Both of them are 37, and she was single for 8 years before this. 8 years. My girl was out here living her best independent life, probably had her routines down, her space exactly how she wanted it. None of that, why is there beard hair in the sink drama? She says the relationship's been healthy overall, they're both independent, she loves spending time with him, no complaints. But then, and there's always a but then, isn't there? About 6 months ago, this man comes to her and says he wants to open up the relationship. Now let me just pause here because the audacity is already brewing. We just don't know it yet. He specifically says he wants to go on dates and sleep with other women. Not, I think we should explore our options together, or I'm feeling like we need more excitement. Excitement. Nah. This man had a target acquired. He literally had someone picked out already, but we'll get to that absolute disaster in a minute. The writer is understandably like, what now? Because she's never done the whole open relationship thing before. Very reasonable reaction. And her boyfriend, playing the part of Mr. Generous, tells her, oh, you can date and sleep with other men too. Like he's doing her some huge favor. He even throws in the classic, if you're uncomfortable, we can close it back up safety net, probably thinking he'd never need to actually use it because, well, you'll see why. They set up some ground rules, the main one being they don't discuss who they're seeing or what they're doing, which, honestly, that's where he really messed up for himself because he set up the perfect system for his own downfall and didn't even realize it. So our writer downloads a dating app, and within a few days, she's got 500 plus likes. 500 plus, and it's been steady since then. Meanwhile, you just know this man was probably sitting there refreshing his app every 30 seconds like, where are my likes? The app must be broken. She starts going on 1 or 2 dates a month, finds some people who are also in open relationships that she's seeing regularly, and she's actually enjoying herself. She went from skeptical to, you know what, this non-committal thing is kind of nice actually. Character development, growth. Meanwhile, her boyfriend is probably having Vietnam-style flashbacks every time he opens his dating app to absolute crickets. Now here's where it gets delicious. She's at her boyfriend's house the other day, her phone's on the kitchen counter, just existing, minding its business, and he sees notifications coming through. And does this man do the reasonable thing and ignore it because they agreed not to discuss their dating lives? Of course not. He goes full FBI mode, snooping through her phone, reading her messages, going through the dating app. The man went through her phone like he was looking for the nuclear codes. And he gets angry, like absolutely loses it. Angry. Here's where the truth comes spilling out like the tea it is. This man opened the relationship specifically to pursue a younger colleague at his workplace. A colleague. He wanted to take her on a date, but this poor girl thought he meant like a casual work lunch. She probably showed up in business casual, ready to talk about quarterly reports while he's sitting there with flowers or some cringe nonsense. She didn't want him like that at all. But wait, it gets even worse. This man literally admits out loud with his whole chest that he wanted to see if it would work with this younger coworker so he could leave the writer for her. Let me repeat that for the people in the back. He opened the relationship as an exit strategy. He was essentially test driving a new model while keeping the current one in the garage as a backup. The absolute audacity, the unmitigated gall. But karma is a beautiful thing because not only did the colleague reject him, but no one else wanted him either. In 6 whole months, this man has had a few rough dates, and you know if he's admitting they were rough, they were disasters. And he hasn't slept with a single other person. Not one. Meanwhile, the writer is out here thriving, going on regular dates, has multiple people she's seeing casually, living her best open relationship life. The math is absolutely mathing here, and it's hilarious. He really thought he was going to have women lined up around the block while his girlfriend sat at home knitting or something, just waiting for him to come back from his dates. He probably imagined her getting maybe one awkward coffee date every few months with some guy who talks about his crypto investments too much. Instead, she's the one with options, and he's the one getting curved left and right. The writer even says she feels somewhat embarrassed for him, which is savage, but also fair. Like, secondhand embarrassment is real, and this is a prime case. So what does this man-child do when confronted with the consequences of his own actions? He demands they close the relationship immediately. Not asks, not suggests, demands. Like, sir, you can't just change the rules of the game because you're losing. That's not how this works. That's not how any of this works. The writer, showing more grace than I would have, honestly, suggests they either end things or take a break, which is incredibly reasonable considering he just admitted he was planning to leave her for someone else. But does he respond like a rational adult? Nope. He gets outraged and starts calling her names. Names. This grown man, this 37-year-old adult human, resorts to name-calling because his girlfriend suggested consequences for his actions. She leaves, as she absolutely should, and while walking home, she's contemplating fully breaking it off with him. And now he's blowing up her phone, probably with a mix of apologies, more anger, maybe some baby please messages, definitely some manipulation attempts. Let me be crystal clear here. The writer is absolutely, positively, without a doubt, not the asshole. Like, not even a little bit. Not even 1%. This man opened the relationship for the specific purpose of cheating with permission and lining up his next girlfriend before dumping the current one. That's not ethical non-monogamy, that's just being a terrible person with extra steps. He thought he was going to have his cake, eat it too, and then trade it in for a younger cake. But instead, he's sitting there with no cake, watching his girlfriend enjoy a whole bakery, and he's big mad about it. The rules were his idea. The open relationship was his idea. The don't discuss it boundary was probably his idea because he didn't want to hear about her success while he was failing. And now he wants to flip the table because the game didn't go the way he planned? Absolutely not. That's not how this works. And can we talk about the snooping? They had an agreement not to discuss their dating lives, and he violated that by going through her phone. He broke the rules he set up because he couldn't handle that she was doing exactly what he gave her permission to do. The hypocrisy is Olympic level. Honestly, the writer should just end it. Clean break. This man has shown her exactly who he is. Someone who was ready to leave her for someone else, who only values her as a backup option, who can't handle her having the same freedoms he demanded for himself, and who resorts to verbal abuse when things don't go his way. He literally told her he wanted to leave her for someone else. That's not something you come back from. There's no let's work on us after I was trying to replace you but nobody wanted me, so I guess you'll do. The trash really took itself out here, but it's trying to climb back into the bin because it has nowhere else to go. Don't let it back in. So to answer the question, no, writer, You are not the asshole, not even slightly. Your boyfriend is the asshole, and also the dumbest person in this entire story for thinking this would go differently. He's the asshole for opening the relationship to cheat with permission, for trying to line up your replacement, for snooping through your phone, for getting mad that you followed the rules he created, and for calling you names when you suggested a completely reasonable solution. You spent 8 years single before this relationship. You clearly know how to be independent and happy on your own. Don't let this man guilt you into staying just because his backup plan failed and now he's stuck with his first choice by default. Except you're not really his first choice. Are you? You're just the only choice that'll still tolerate him. And honestly, even that shouldn't be true anymore. Break up with him, block his number, keep going on your dates. Live your life. He made his bed, tried to make it with someone else, failed miserably, and now wants to act shocked that there are consequences. Let him lie in it, alone, which seems to be his only option anyway, since apparently nobody else wants him either. The audacity of men never ceases to amaze me, but this one really shot for the stars and landed face first in the dirt. AITAH for not saying thank you when a parent returned my son's lunchbox. All right, buckle up because this story is about to take us on a journey through the absolute madness of what should have been the simplest interaction known to humankind, returning something that doesn't belong to you. We've got a 35-year-old mom with a 4-year-old son who we're calling Ben. She's out here doing the good mom thing, packing lunches for all her kids in those fancy bento boxes. And listen, if you don't know what these are, they're those nice, compartmentalized lunch boxes that make you feel like you have your life together. They're like $50 on Amazon, which isn't cheap, but also isn't breaking the bank. It's a reasonable investment for something your kid uses every single day. Now, the writer is smart about this. She labels everything, the lunchbox, the actual lunch inside, pretty much everything her kids own and take to school. She's got those labels with the cute little icons and their names, probably laminated and everything. She's prepared. She's organized. She's the kind of mom who has her stuff together. And you know what? Good for her, because I can barely remember to charge my phone at night. So it's a regular Tuesday. She goes to pick up Ben from school, and she notices his backpack feels lighter than usual. She looks inside and realizes the bento box is missing. Okay, things get lost at school. Kids forget stuff. It happens. Not a huge deal yet. She mentions it to one of the after-school teachers, and this is where our saga begins. The teacher tells her, and I need you to really hear this, that she accidentally sent the lunchbox home with another kid. Now, I want us to pause here for a second because this lunchbox was labeled. It had Ben's name on it, but it got sent home with a kid named Ken because apparently they have similar names. I get that Ben and Ken sound alike. I really do. But girl, that's literally what the labels are for. That's the entire purpose of writing your kid's name on everything, so that when there's a Ken and a Ben in the same class, we can tell whose stuff is whose. But, okay, mistakes happen. The teacher messed up. We're still in no biggie territory at this point, and the writer is being super chill about it, which honestly shows how reasonable she is from the jump. The writer kindly asks the teacher to have the parent return it the next day. Simple request, right? Wrong. Because apparently we're about to enter the twilight zone where returning a lunchbox becomes more complicated than filing taxes. Next day rolls around, Wednesday, and the writer asks about the lunchbox. The teacher says the parent messaged her saying she'll bring it the following day because they're part-time students who only come on Tuesdays and Thursdays. Okay, so we're already at strike one because the parent had the lunchbox on Tuesday, knew it wasn't hers, and didn't bring it back on Tuesday. But fine, they're only there T8th, so we'll wait until Thursday. That's only one more day. The writer is being incredibly patient at this point. Way more patient than I would be, honestly. Thursday comes around, that's 2 days after the lunchbox originally went missing, and the writer is like, okay, cool, where's my son's lunchbox? And the teacher hits her with the, oh, the parent forgot it, but we'll definitely bring it next Tuesday. Now we're at strike two. This parent has now had multiple days to remember to bring back something that doesn't belong to her, has been reminded by the teacher, and still forgot. The writer says she's a little annoyed, but decides to give the parent some grace. And honestly, she's a better person than me because I would already be getting irritated. It's been almost a week at this point over a lunchbox, but our writer is trying to be understanding. Maybe the parent is overwhelmed, maybe she's dealing with stuff, life gets busy, so she gives grace and waits for next Tuesday. Surely by then, with all these reminders, the lunchbox will be returned, right? Right. Oh, sweet summer child, if only. Next Tuesday arrives, and I cannot stress this enough, no lunchbox. We are now nearly 2 weeks into this lunchbox saga. At this point, the writer is properly annoyed, which is the polite way of saying absolutely done with this nonsense. And honestly, who can blame her? She escalates it to the daytime teachers, asking them to reach out to this parent because this is getting ridiculous. At this point, she's talking to multiple teachers about a lunchbox, like it's some kind of hostage negotiation. Then we fast forward another week. We are now 3 weeks into the missing lunchbox situation. Still no lunchbox. And here's where we finally get some context. Apparently, the mother is postpartum and very forgetful. Okay, listen, postpartum is hard. I have sympathy for postpartum moms. The hormones, the exhaustion, the brain fog, it's all real and it's all valid. New babies are no joke, and I genuinely get that your brain turns into mush when you're running on 2 hours of sleep and your body is still recovering. But you know what? Being postpartum doesn't mean you get a free pass to keep someone else's property for a month. And here's the thing that really gets me. This mom makes a joke to the teacher about how the lunchbox is getting closer to school because she put it by her front door. She's joking about it. This woman has had someone else's $50 lunchbox for 3 weeks, has been reminded multiple times, knows the other parent is trying to get it back, and she's making jokes like it's a funny little quirky situation. Ma'am, read the room. This stopped being cute approximately 2.5 weeks ago. The lunchbox journey to the front door is not the heartwarming story arc you think it is. And the writer makes an excellent point that honestly had me yelling at my screen. Just put it in your car, put it in your kid's backpack, set a phone reminder, tie a string around your finger, write it on your hand, tattoo it on your forehead. Do literally anything to remember to bring it back. If you're that forgetful, create a system. The lunchbox was literally by the front door according to her own joke, so she had to walk past it to leave the house. How do you walk past something specifically placed by the door as a reminder and still forget it? That's not forgetfulness at that point. That's willful negligence. The writer's husband at this point wants her to find the parent and confront her directly, which honestly is a valid response because this is absolutely bananas. Like, this man is ready to throw hands over a lunchbox, and you know what? I respect it. Protect your wife's sanity, sir. But the teachers won't give out her name, which I get, privacy and all that, and the writer can never catch the kid or the mom at pickup. So she's stuck in this bizarre limbo where her property is being held hostage by someone she can't even identify. It's like trying to fight a ghost. So the writer does what any fed-up parent would do. She sends a stern email to the principal, the admin, and all of her son's teachers, expressing her frustration and explaining that she just wants her kid's stuff back, which is completely reasonable. She's not asking for the moon here. She's asking for her own property to be returned after almost a month. She's had to escalate a lunchbox situation to the principal level, which is absolutely wild when you think about it. And apparently, this is what finally gets through to the parent. The email to the principal must have lit a fire because suddenly the next Thursday, we are now 4 weeks into this saga, almost a full month, the parent finally shows up with the lunchbox. 4 weeks, 28 days. For a lunchbox, I've gotten packages shipped from China faster than this woman returned a lunchbox to the same school she goes to twice a week. The sheer commitment to not bringing this lunchbox back is honestly kind of impressive in the worst possible way. So they finally meet. The parent apologizes and tries to joke about the situation. She's trying to make light of it, probably trying to diffuse the tension with humor, because I'm sure she can feel the icy vibes radiating off the writer. And look, I get it. When you've messed up and you're embarrassed, sometimes humor is a defense mechanism. When you know you've been absolutely terrible about something, you try to laugh it off to make it seem less serious. But girl, read the situation. This is not the time for jokes. You've had this woman's property for a month. The writer just stares at her blankly, doesn't laugh, doesn't smile, doesn't even blink, just stares. Then says, okay, takes the lunchbox and leaves. No thank you, no it's fine, no don't worry about it, no pleasantries. Just takes her property and dips. And honestly, icon behavior. Absolutely legendary. Because what exactly should she be thanking this woman for? Returning something that was never hers in the first place, after a month of being reminded, after having to involve the principal? That's like someone stealing your car, keeping it for a month, driving it around, then expecting you to throw them a parade when they finally give it back. Ma'am, you don't get a cookie for eventually doing what you should have done 3 weeks and 6 days ago. But here's where the audacity really ramps up to levels I didn't think were possible, like we're reaching stratospheric levels of nerve here. This parent, this woman who kept someone else's lunchbox for 4 weeks despite multiple reminders from multiple people, goes and tells other parents that the writer was rude to her. She's out here playing the victim. She's gossiping at pickup. She's telling people that the writer should have been more appreciative that she brought the lunchbox back. I'm sorry, appreciative? Appreciative of what exactly? That you finally returned stolen property? Because let's be real, at a certain point, keeping something that doesn't belong to you after being asked to return it multiple times is basically theft. You don't get appreciation points for eventually not being a thief. That's not how this works. That's not how any of this works. The entitlement is absolutely through the roof. This woman really thought she deserved a thank you for taking 4 weeks to do something that should have taken 1 day, maximum. She thought she deserved gratitude for doing the bare minimum after being chased down by teachers, administrators, and a principal. She probably wanted a standing ovation and a world's best lunchbox returner trophy. The delusion is honestly impressive in its magnitude. And now she's going around to other parents painting the writer as the bad guy in this scenario. She's probably telling them some version of, I returned her lunchbox and she was so rude to me. Can you believe it? While conveniently leaving out the part where she held on to it for a month. Conveniently forgetting to mention the multiple reminders, the jokes she made, the principal email. Just, I did this nice thing and she was mean to me. The revisionist history is wild. Let me be absolutely crystal clear here. The writer is not the asshole, not even a little bit, not even one tiny bit, not even 0.001%. You know who is the asshole? The parent who kept the lunchbox for 4 weeks. That's the asshole. The parent who made jokes about the situation while someone else was waiting for their property back? Also the asshole. The parent who now expects sympathy and gratitude for eventually doing what she should have done immediately? The biggest asshole. She's the whole entire asshole and then some. The writer was incredibly patient. She gave grace after the first delay. She gave grace after the second delay. She gave grace after delays 3, 4, and 5. She escalated appropriately through proper channels instead of showing up at this woman's house, which honestly would have been justified at that point. She remained calm enough to even show up to the exchange instead of sending her husband to handle it, which I absolutely would have done because I would not have trusted myself. And let's talk about what thank you even means in this context. Thank you is for when someone does something kind or goes out of their way for you. Thank you is for favors and generosity and thoughtful gestures. Thank you is when someone helps you move or brings you soup when you're sick or picks up something you needed from the store. Returning someone's property after a month of keeping it despite repeated requests is not a favor. That's not something that deserves thanks. That's literally just not being terrible anymore. It's like if someone punched you in the face every day for a month and then stopped and expected you to thank them for no longer punching you. Like, no ma'am, I'm not going to thank you for ceasing your bad behavior. That's not how this works. You don't get credit for eventually stopping doing the wrong thing. The postpartum thing, look, I want to be sensitive about this because postpartum is genuinely challenging and I'm not trying to minimize that struggle. But being postpartum doesn't exempt you from basic courtesy and responsibility. If you're so forgetful that you can't remember to bring back a lunchbox after a month of reminders, then you need to communicate that and work out a different solution. Maybe the writer could have picked it up from her house. Maybe they could have met somewhere else. Maybe the parent could have mailed it. Maybe literally anything other than just not bringing it week after week after week after week while making jokes about it. And you know what really gets me? This parent had the energy to gossip to other parents about how rude the writer was, but didn't have the energy to put a lunchbox in her car for 4 weeks. The math isn't mathing. She had time to play victim and gather sympathy, but not time to do the basic human thing of returning someone's property. She had time to construct a narrative about how she's the wronged party here, but not time to grab a lunchbox on her way out the door. Please, make it make sense. The writer had every right to be cold in that exchange. She had every right to not perform gratitude that she didn't feel. She had every right to take her property and leave without engaging in chit-chat or fake pleasantries. Women are not required to smile and be nice and make everyone feel comfortable when they've been wronged. We're allowed to be annoyed when people disrespect our time and our property. We don't have to perform happiness and gratitude to make other people feel better about their own bad behavior. And honestly, the blank stare was probably the most polite response available in that moment, because the alternative would have been telling this woman exactly how frustrating and disrespectful the whole situation was, and that would have actually been rude. The writer showed restraint by just taking the lunchbox and leaving. She could have gone off. She could have listed every single time she asked for it back, every excuse she got, every week she had to buy or use a different lunch container for her son. She could have mentioned the principal email and how embarrassing it was to have to escalate something so simple. But she didn't. She just took her stuff and left. So no, writer, you are absolutely not the asshole. You are the victim of someone else's chronic thoughtlessness, and then their audacity to expect praise for eventually doing the right thing. You handled this with way more patience than most people would have managed. You gave grace, you escalated appropriately, you stayed calm, and you didn't cause a scene even when you would have been justified in doing so. That other parent can go complain to whoever she wants. Anyone with a brain will hear, "I kept her lunchbox for 4 weeks," and immediately realize she's the problem, not you. And if there are parents who actually think you're in the wrong here, those are people whose opinions don't matter anyway, because they clearly have no concept of basic respect or boundaries. They're probably the same people who borrow stuff and never return it, who are always running late, who think the world should accommodate their chaos. You didn't owe her a thank you. You didn't owe her a smile. You didn't owe her warmth or understanding or forgiveness in that moment. You didn't owe her anything, except maybe an invoice for the time and mental energy this nonsense cost you over the past month. Stand your ground, keep your blank stares ready for future encounters, and know that you were completely, totally, 100% in the right here. The audacity of some people never ceases to amaze me, but this one really took the cake. Ate it, kept it for 4 weeks, and then expected applause for eventually admitting she ate it. She really thought she deserved a parade for doing the absolute bare minimum after a month of not doing it. The entitlement is truly breathtaking. I quit my job so I do not have to work the holidays, and now a new mom has to work in my place. Okay, everyone, strap in, because we are about to dive into a story that is going to make your blood absolutely boil with the injustice of it all. This one hits different because it's not just about workplace drama. It's about grief, family, respect, and what happens when someone who's been giving and giving and giving for years finally decides to choose themselves for once. So we've got an ICU nurse here, and can we just pause for a second to acknowledge that ICU nurses are literal heroes? These people deal with life and death situations every single day. They hold people's hands as they take their last breaths. They watch miracles happen and tragedies unfold. This is not an easy job, and the writer has been doing it while dealing with her own personal tragedy. The The writer is widowed. Her husband passed away 5 years ago. On top of that, she's dealt with infertility issues, so she doesn't have children. Now, I need everyone to really sit with that for a moment, because the pain of losing your spouse and dealing with infertility is a double grief that most people can't even imagine. She's been carrying this weight while also showing up to one of the most emotionally demanding jobs that exists. And for the last 6 years, 6 entire years, she's worked every single Thanksgiving, Christmas Eve, Christmas, and New Year's. Every single one. She says it was no big deal because she didn't have an immediate family to celebrate with. Her parents and siblings all work in retail and public safety, which means they're also working holidays. So the family got into the habit of celebrating several days after the actual holiday anyway. Can we talk about how selfless this is? She could have requested holidays off. She could have insisted on rotating like everyone else, but she didn't. She consistently volunteered to work so that her coworkers, people with kids, people with families, could be home for the holidays. For 6 years, she put everyone else first. 6 Christmases of watching other people go home to their families while she stayed at the hospital. 6 New Year's Eves of working while everyone else celebrated. That's not nothing. That's a pattern of incredible generosity and self-sacrifice. But then this year, something changes. Her parents retire, and they want to take a family trip to Europe. They have relatives over there and want to go to the European Christmas markets, which honestly sounds magical and like the trip of a lifetime. This is the first time in years that the whole family can actually celebrate together on the actual holiday because her parents aren't working anymore. So, in July, let me repeat that, July, the writer requests the week of Christmas off. That's 5 months in advance. That's not a last-minute request. That's not, oh, I forgot to ask until now. That's being responsible and planning ahead and following proper workplace procedures. And her request was approved. Her brother and sister also got the time off from their jobs because they all requested it so early. The whole family is coordinating this trip, probably booking flights and hotels and making plans. Everyone is excited. The writer is probably feeling something she hasn't felt in years. Genuine holiday excitement. After 6 years of working every Christmas, after 5 years of grief, after dealing with infertility and loss, she's finally going to have a special holiday with her family. She's finally choosing herself. She's finally putting her own joy first. Fast forward to the last week of October. We're now less than 2 months from Christmas, and travel plans are presumably all locked in, and the boss calls her into the office. The boss tells her, and I need you to really hear this, that she has to take away her approved vacation because a coworker had a baby a few months ago and needs the time off to celebrate the baby's first Christmas. Let's unpack this absolute nonsense. First of all, this coworker had a baby last year too. That's right, she has 2 babies, one from last year and one from this year, born 10 months apart. Which, hey, no judgment on having kids close together, but it's relevant information. This coworker didn't work any holidays last year because of her first baby, and wasn't scheduled to work any this year either. So she's already getting preferential treatment, and now she wants the writer's approved vacation time too? The writer very reasonably argues that her vacation was approved back in July, and she's made plans based on that approval. She points out that she's worked the last 6 Christmas holidays and will still be working Thanksgiving and New Year's this year. This is not someone trying to get out of all the holidays. She's literally just asking for the 1 week that was already approved 5 months ago. And here's where the boss says something that is so infuriating I can barely type it out. She says that priority for holiday vacations was given to those who had families. I'm sorry. What? The writer is family. She has parents, siblings, nieces, nephews, presumably. Just because she's widowed and doesn't have children doesn't mean she doesn't have a family. The audacity of that statement is absolutely mind-blowing. The implication that her family somehow counts less, that her relationships are less valid, that her desire to spend the holidays with her loved ones is less important, it's disgusting. The writer rightfully calls this out. She tells her boss that just because she's widowed and doesn't have children doesn't mean she doesn't have a family. And what does the boss do? She backpedals and changes her excuse. Now she says people with children are given priority so they can spend Christmas with them. Okay, so let me get this straight. The policy has gone from people with families get priority to people with children get priority in the span of like 30 seconds. The boss is literally making up justifications on the spot because she knows her reasoning is trash. The writer reminds her again that her vacation was approved in July, 5 months ago, and that she's not canceling her trip for someone who didn't even request the time off in a timely manner, because that's what this comes down to. The coworker with the baby apparently didn't request Christmas off until recently, and now the boss wants to punish the writer for the coworker's poor planning. And here's what really gets me. The coworker has a baby. Babies don't even remember their first Christmas. That baby is not going to have trauma from mom working on Christmas. But you know who will remember this trip? The writer. This is potentially a healing experience for someone who's been dealing with grief for 5 years. This is a chance to make new memories with her family. This is significant and meaningful in a way that a baby's first Christmas, which, again, the baby won't remember, just isn't. But the boss doesn't change her mind. She puts the writer on the schedule for Christmas and takes the coworker off. Just like that. Completely disregarding the approved vacation request, completely dismissing the writer's plans and her 6 years of sacrifice. So the writer does what any reasonable person would do. She takes it to HR. And HR basically shrugs and says, the manager determines the schedule, no work rules were broken. Which is technically true, but also completely useless. Like, yes, maybe no specific policy was violated, but what about basic decency? What about honoring approved time off requests? What about treating employees with respect? Apparently none of that matters. The writer is stuck. Her approved vacation has been revoked. Her boss won't budge. HR won't help. Her entire family has planned this trip, and she's the only one who can't go now because her boss decided that her family doesn't matter as much as someone else's. So, you know what she does? She quits. She turns in her notice, and her last day will be the day before Thanksgiving. And this is where it gets beautiful in the most poetic justice kind of way. Because the writer quit, now the coworker has to work both Thanksgiving and Christmas. The boss's plan completely backfired. She tried to force the writer to sacrifice her vacation, and instead she lost a reliable employee who'd been working every holiday for 6 years. Now she's probably scrambling to cover those shifts, and the coworker who needed Christmas off is stuck working it anyway. Chef's kiss. Absolutely perfect. The consequences of the boss's terrible decision came back to bite her immediately. But here's where it gets frustrating again. The other coworkers are calling the writer a jerk. They're saying she should have just sucked it up and worked Christmas to let the other coworker have time with her baby. Excuse me? Excuse me. This woman has sucked it up for 6 years. She's worked every single holiday for 6 years so that these exact coworkers could be home with their families. And the one single time in 6 years that she requests a holiday off and makes plans with her family, she's the villain. The double standard is absolutely insane. When she works every holiday, nobody's throwing her a parade or calling her a hero. It's just expected. It's just what she does. But the moment she wants one Christmas off, suddenly she's selfish, suddenly she's not being a team player. Let me be extremely clear here. The writer is absolutely, positively, without a shadow of a doubt, not the asshole. She requested time off 5 months in advance. Her request was approved. She made plans based on that approval. She's worked every holiday for 6 years straight. She's given and given and given to this workplace and her coworkers. And when she finally asks for something for herself, she gets told her family doesn't matter because she doesn't have kids. That's not okay. That's not how you treat employees. That's not how you treat human beings. The boss is the asshole here. 100%. She approved a vacation request and then revoked it because someone else didn't plan ahead. She told an employee that her family doesn't count because she doesn't have children. She completely dismissed 6 years of holiday coverage and dedication. She created this entire mess through terrible management and favoritism. HR is also kind of the asshole for not stepping in when they clearly should have. The manager determines the schedule. is a cop-out when the manager is clearly being unfair and going back on approved requests. The coworker with the baby is also a bit of an asshole, honestly. Did she not know that Christmas happens every year? Did she not think to request time off ahead of time like everyone else? Why does she think her baby's first Christmas, which the baby won't remember, is more important than someone else's family plans that were approved months ago? And the coworkers calling the writer a jerk? They're assholes too. They've been benefiting from her working holidays for 6 years, and now they're mad that she's standing up for herself? They should be ashamed. The writer says she'll greatly miss her job, that she loved the hospital and her unit. And that breaks my heart a little because she shouldn't have to leave a job she loves because of terrible management. But I'm also proud of her for choosing herself. She says it's time for reflection and putting herself first, something she hasn't done since her husband passed. That's huge. That's growth. That's someone finally recognizing their own worth after years of grief and self-sacrifice. And you know what? Nursing jobs are plentiful. ICU nurses are in high demand everywhere. She's going to take December off, go on her trip, spend the holidays with her family, and then find a new job in the new year. A job that will hopefully appreciate her dedication and not treat her like her family doesn't matter. I love that she's taking the whole month of December off. After 6 years of working every holiday, after 5 years of grief, after dealing with this workplace nonsense, she deserves a month to herself. She deserves to rest and heal and enjoy her family and not think about ungrateful bosses and entitled coworkers. The whole situation with the coworker now having to work both holidays, that's not the writer's fault. That's the natural consequence of the boss's bad decision. The boss created this staffing problem by revoking an approved vacation. The boss caused this by not requiring timely vacation requests. The boss made this bed and now she gets to lie in it. If the coworkers are mad, they should be mad at the boss for terrible management, not at the writer for having boundaries and self-respect. If they're upset about coverage, they should be upset that the hospital apparently doesn't have a fair system for holiday scheduling that protects approved time off. The writer followed all the rules. She requested time off properly and early. She worked every holiday for 6 years without complaint. She tried to resolve the issue through HR. When none of that worked and she was left with no other options, she made the choice that was best for her mental health and her family. That's not being a jerk. That's not being selfish. That's called having self-respect and boundaries. And can we talk about the bigger picture here? This is what happens when workplaces, especially healthcare, treat employees like they're disposable. This is what happens when managers play favorites and don't honor commitments. And this is what happens when you take advantage of someone's kindness for years and then expect them to just keep giving forever. The writer gave 6 years of holidays. She gave understanding and flexibility. She covered for everyone else. And when she needed the workplace to give back just once, they refused. So she left. And honestly, good for her. I hope she has the most amazing trip to Europe. I hope she drinks mulled wine at the Christmas markets and makes beautiful memories with her family. I hope she eats all the food and sees all the sights and feels joy and peace and healing. I hope December is everything she needs it to be. And I hope when she starts her new job in January, it's at a place that values her, respects her, and doesn't treat her like her life and family matter less because she's widowed and doesn't have kids. The writer is not the asshole. She's a woman who's been through hell, who gave everything to her job and coworkers for years, and who finally decided she deserves to be happy too. Anyone who has a problem with that can take it up with the terrible boss who created this whole mess in the first place. Stand your ground, writer. Enjoy your trip. Live your life. You've earned it. Am I the asshole for telling my brother's wife that being a stay-at-home mom doesn't mean being a stay-in-bed mom? Okay, so right off the bat, this title is already giving some spicy energy. And I need everyone to understand that we're about to wade into some seriously complicated territory here. We've got a brother, 27, his wife, 25, a 5-month-old baby, and the writer who lives about 10 minutes away and drops by sometimes to help. So the setup is pretty standard. The brother works long hours, the wife stays home to take care of the baby, and the writer tries to be supportive by visiting and helping out. Sounds wholesome, right? Like a nice family support system. But then we get into what's actually been happening lately, and things start to get messy real quick. The writer says that every time they go over there recently, the wife is in bed scrolling on her phone or saying she needs a break. And listen, I'm not going to immediately jump on the she's lazy train because new moms do need breaks. Babies are exhausting. But then we get more details. The house is a mess, bottles everywhere, laundry not done, dishes in the sink, and the baby is crying most of the time. Now, I want us to really sit with this picture for a second because it's painting a concerning scene. We're not talking about, oh, there's some dishes in the sink and a load of laundry to fold. We're talking about bottles everywhere, which suggests this has been building up for a while. The baby is crying most of the time, which means the baby's needs aren't being met consistently. This isn't just the house isn't Pinterest perfect. This is starting to look like something else entirely. Then we get to last weekend, and this is where things really come to a head. The brother calls the writer saying he's losing it. When the writer gets there, the brother is trying to cook dinner with one hand while holding the baby with the other. That's already a stressful image, right? This man is out here doing a juggling act, trying to feed his family while soothing his crying child. And where's the wife during all of this? She's literally in bed watching Netflix. While her husband is struggling in the kitchen with a crying baby, she's in bed watching TV shows. Not sleeping, not pumping, not recovering from an injury. Just watching Netflix. The writer ends up feeding the baby, cleaning up a bit, and helping the brother calm things down. And the wife, she stayed in bed the whole time. She didn't get up when her sister/her brother-in-law came over. She didn't get up when the baby was being fed. She just stayed in bed. That's not normal, and I think we need to acknowledge that straight up. After everything is settled, the writer goes to check on the wife and asks if she's okay. This is important. The writer asked if she was okay first. They didn't immediately go in guns blazing with accusations. They checked in, which shows they were at least trying to be considerate. And what does the wife say? Yeah, a bit exhausted. While her husband is working 40, 50 hours a week and still helping with the baby when he gets home, while the house is falling apart, while the baby is crying constantly, while she's been in bed watching Netflix, a bit exhausted. And this is where the writer loses their cool and says, being in home doesn't mean that you always have to be in the bed scrolling and watching TV shows. Now, before we get into whether this was the right or wrong thing to say, let's talk about what might actually be happening here, because I think there's some important context we need to consider. Postpartum depression is real. Postpartum anxiety is real. These are serious medical conditions that can absolutely make it impossible for a new mom to function. The constant bed rest, the phone scrolling, the inability to care for the baby or the house, these can all be symptoms of PPD. And if that's what's going on here, this woman needs help, not judgment. But here's the thing, and this is where it gets complicated. Even if she does have PPD, that doesn't mean the brother should be drowning while she refuses to acknowledge there's a problem. PPD is an explanation, not an excuse to let everything fall apart without seeking help. If you're so exhausted and overwhelmed that you can't take care of your baby or your home, that's the point where you need to say, I need help, something is wrong. Not just stay in bed watching Netflix while your partner does everything. The writer mentions that the brother works 40 to 50 hours a week and still helps with the baby. So this man is working a full-time job, coming home, and then doing childcare and housework because his wife isn't doing it during the day. That's not sustainable. That's a recipe for burnout, resentment, and a broken marriage. And I think the writer saw their brother drowning and just couldn't take it anymore. They watched him struggle to cook dinner while holding a crying baby. They watched him work himself to the bone while his wife stayed in bed. They saw the exhaustion in his eyes when he called for help, and they snapped. Was it the most tactful thing to say? Probably not. Could it have been phrased better? Definitely. But was it coming from a place of genuine concern? I think so. The wife started crying and complained to the brother, and now he's mad at the writer for hurting her. And okay, I get it. Nobody wants to see their partner cry. Nobody wants family drama. But the fact that the brother is mad at the writer instead of addressing the actual problem is concerning. His wife is in bed all day. His house is a disaster. His baby is crying constantly. He's working 50 hours a week and doing all the housework and childcare. And he's mad at his sibling for pointing it out. Sir, you called them for help. You said you were losing it. And now you're defending the person who's contributing to the problem? This is classic misplaced anger. The brother is probably exhausted, overwhelmed, and doesn't know how to deal with his wife's issues, so it's easier to be mad at the writer for being mean than to confront the actual problem in his marriage. The writer says they literally don't have anything against her and just felt bad for the brother doing everything by himself. And I believe that. This doesn't read like someone who hates their sister-in-law or wants to cause problems. This reads like someone who loves their brother and is watching him suffer. But here's where I'm going to get real with everyone. The way the writer handled this wasn't great, even if their intentions were good. Going to someone who's clearly struggling, whether it's from PPD, adjustment issues, or just being overwhelmed, and essentially calling them lazy is not going to help the situation. It's going to make them defensive. It's going to make them shut down, and it's going to create family drama that doesn't solve the actual problem. What the writer should have done, and I know hindsight is 20/20, is talk to their brother privately about their concerns, express worry that the wife might be dealing with PPD, suggest that maybe she needs to see a doctor, offer to help research therapists or support groups. Come at it from a place of, I'm worried about both of you, rather than she's being lazy. Because here's the truth that nobody wants to hear. If the wife is dealing with PPD or another mental health issue, she needs medical help, not a lecture. And if she's not dealing with those issues and is just not pulling her weight, then that's a conversation her husband needs to have with her, not the writer. The writer's heart was in the right place, but the execution was rough. And now, instead of the wife getting help or the brother addressing the issues in his marriage, everyone's mad at the writer and nothing has actually been solved. So let's talk about the actual question. Am I the asshole for telling my brother's wife that being a stay-at-home mom doesn't mean being a stay-in-bed mom? Here's my take. You're not the asshole, but you're also not completely in the right here either. This is more of an everyone sucks here situation. Or maybe a no assholes here, just people struggling situation depending on what's actually going on with the wife. If the wife has PPD or another medical issue, then yeah, the writer was kind of an asshole for the way they approached it, even though their concerns were valid. Mental illness isn't laziness, and someone struggling with PPD can't just get out of bed and clean, the same way someone without it can. The wife would need medical intervention, not judgment. If the wife doesn't have PPD and is just overwhelmed or struggling to adjust, the writer's comment was still harsh, but more understandable. New motherhood is hard, but if you're struggling, you need to communicate that and ask for help, not just check out while your partner drowns. If the wife is just genuinely not pulling her weight without any underlying medical reason, then the writer's frustration is completely valid, even if the delivery could have been better. The problem is we don't actually know which scenario this is. And that's the core issue. Nobody seems to be talking about what's actually going on. The wife is in bed saying she's a bit exhausted. The brother is working himself to death, but getting mad when someone points out the problem. The writer is trying to help, but doing it in a way that creates more conflict. What this family actually needs is communication and probably professional help. The wife needs to see a doctor to rule out PPD or other postpartum issues. The brother needs to have an honest conversation with his wife about the division of labor and his concerns. The writer needs to support their brother without attacking his wife. But instead, everyone's fighting and nothing is getting better. The baby is still probably crying, the house is still probably a mess, the brother is still probably exhausted, and now there's family drama on top of everything else. Here's what I think really happened. The writer saw their brother struggling and wanted to help. They saw what looked like unfair distribution of labor and spoke up about it. But they didn't consider that there might be deeper issues at play, and they confronted the wife in a moment of frustration rather than approaching it strategically. The comment itself, being in home doesn't mean that you always have to be in the bed scrolling and watching TV shows, is harsh. It's accusatory. It's the kind of thing that's going to make someone cry and get defensive, not the kind of thing that's going to inspire change or open up a productive conversation. A better approach would have been, "Hey, I've noticed you seem to be in bed a lot when I come over. Is everything okay? Are you feeling overwhelmed? Do you think you might want to talk to a doctor about how you're feeling? I'm worried about you." That shows concern without judgment. That opens the door for the wife to admit she's struggling without feeling attacked. That gives her an out to say, "You know what? I haven't been feeling like myself," instead of just getting defensive. But that's not what happened. And now we're here. The writer is not the asshole for being concerned about their brother. They're not the asshole for noticing that something is wrong in that household. They're not even the asshole for feeling frustrated watching their brother struggle. But they kind of were the asshole for how they expressed that concern. Good intentions don't always equal good execution, and this is a prime example of that. The wife might be dealing with serious mental health issues that require medical intervention, or she might be struggling to adjust to motherhood and needs support and help, not criticism. Or she might genuinely not be pulling her weight in the household. We don't know which it is, and honestly, neither does the writer. The brother is also kind of being an asshole here for getting mad at the writer instead of addressing the actual problems in his household. He called for help, the writer came and helped, and now he's mad because the writer said something his wife didn't like? That's not fair either. If things are so bad that you're calling your siblings saying you're losing it, then you can't get mad when they express concern about the situation. So here's my final verdict. The writer is not the asshole for caring about their brother or noticing the problems, but they were a bit of an asshole for how they confronted the wife. The situation called for compassion and strategic thinking, not a frustrated call-out. What needs to happen now? The writer should probably apologize for the harsh delivery while standing firm on their concerns. Something like, "I'm sorry for how I said that. It came out harsher than I meant it to. But I am genuinely worried about both of you, and I think it might help to talk to a doctor about how overwhelming new parenthood can be." The brother needs to stop being mad at the messenger and start addressing the actual issues in his marriage. He needs to have an honest conversation with his wife about what's going on and whether she needs help. The wife needs to be honest about how she's really doing. If she's struggling with PPD, she needs to get help. If she's just overwhelmed, she needs to communicate that and work with her husband to find solutions. Staying in bed watching Netflix while everything falls apart isn't sustainable. This whole situation is messy and complicated, and there probably aren't any clear-cut villains here. Just stressed, overwhelmed people who aren't communicating effectively and don't know how to solve their problems. But bottom line, the writer cares about their brother and wants to help. That's not being an asshole. The delivery just needed work. Am I the asshole? I got my coworkers fired for being creeps. Okay, so before we even dive into this absolute mess, let me just say the title alone, "I got my coworkers fired," is already giving main character energy, but like the good kind. The kind where the main character actually has a spine and isn't putting up with nonsense. So, let's get into it. We've got a 22-year-old woman who's working in a branch where she's the only female employee among 11 male colleagues. 11! She's literally outnumbered 11 to 1, which already sounds like the setup to either a really bad sitcom or a hostile work environment waiting to happen. And spoiler alert, it was option 2. Now, I want us to sit with that for a second, because being the only woman in an all-male workspace is already giving off major red flags before anything even happens. Like, there's nothing inherently wrong with it, but it creates this dynamic where if things go south, you're just alone. There's no other woman to look at and be like, "Yo, Are you seeing this too, or am I crazy? You're just out here solo, which takes a special kind of strength, honestly. So out of these 11 dudes, about 5 of them, 5, nearly half, were being extremely sexist and making comments that made her uncomfortable. And when someone says, made me uncomfortable, you already know it was probably way worse than they're letting on, because we tend to downplay this stuff. Like when someone says a date was a bit awkward, it means the guy spent 2 hours talking about his ex and then asked to split the bill after ordering the most expensive steak. We minimize. It's what we do to cope. But our writer here, she didn't just sit there and take it like they probably expected. She reported them. Not once, but twice to her supervisor. Twice. She gave them chances. She followed the proper channels. She did everything by the book. And here's where it gets interesting. One of those 11 male colleagues is the supervisor. So she's reporting to someone who's in the same demographic as the people harassing her. And I'm sure we can all imagine how well that probably went the first 2 times. The supervisor probably hit her with the classic boys will be boys, or they're just joking around, or maybe you're being too sensitive. The greatest hits of workplace gaslighting. When the supervisor didn't handle it, because of course he didn't, she escalated to their boss, the big boss, the one above the supervisor. And let me just say, this takes guts, because going over your direct supervisor's head is already a risky move career-wise. But doing it as the only woman in an all-male environment, that's walking into the lion's den wearing a meat suit. The pressure to just stay quiet, to not make waves, to be a cool girl who can take a joke, that's immense. But she said, nah, I'm not doing this. And here's the thing that makes this absolutely beautiful. She didn't just go in there with vibes and feelings. She came with receipts, text messages, written proof. She walked in like she was presenting a case to the Supreme Court, because she knew, and she was probably right, that without hard evidence, she'd just get dismissed as being dramatic or emotional or whatever other sexist adjective they'd throw at her. The boss, to his credit, didn't take it lightly. He actually did something, which honestly is already rare enough that it deserves a mention. How many stories do we hear where someone reports harassment and the company just does nothing, or they move the victim instead of the perpetrator, or they do some fake training that changes nothing? But this boss actually came down to the branch and launched a full investigation. He actually investigated. So the investigation happens, and 3 of them get fired. 3 whole employees. It's not a small deal. Companies don't just fire 3 people at once unless something seriously messed up went down. And 2 more are still under investigation, which means 5 out of the original 5 problem employees are facing consequences. The math is mathing, and it's mathing hard. But wait, because it gets so much worse. During the investigation, they found out these dudes weren't just being sexist to the writer. They were making sexual remarks to teenage girls, literal children. The company was working with a school, and these grown men were making sexual comments to high school girls. Girls who were young enough that they had to report it to their teachers because they didn't even know how to handle it themselves. Let that sink in for a second. These weren't just creepy coworkers making inappropriate jokes. These were predators. These were men who felt comfortable enough to sexually harass minors in a professional setting. And they probably thought they'd get away with it because they'd been getting away with harassing the writer for who knows how long. This is where the whole "you got them fired" narrative completely falls apart. Because, babe, you didn't get them fired. They got themselves fired by being absolute creeps who sexually harass teenagers. Like, the bar is literally on the ground, and these men brought shovels to dig under it. But here's where it gets frustrating. The remaining coworkers, the ones who presumably weren't part of the problem, are now giving her the silent treatment and calling her a snitch behind her back. They're whispering about her. Grown men are literally gossiping like they're in a high school cafeteria because she had the audacity to report sexual harassment. Let me be very clear about something. Snitch is what you call someone who tells on you for breaking a rule that doesn't hurt anyone. Like if someone reported you for being 5 minutes late or taking an extra pen from the supply closet. That's snitching. Reporting sexual harassment and predatory behavior toward minors, that's not snitching. That's called doing the right thing. That's called protecting people. That's called basic human decency. These remaining coworkers are mad at the wrong person. They should be mad at their buddies who created such a hostile work environment that they got fired and made the whole workplace toxic. They should be mad at the guys who were so gross they got investigated. Instead, they're mad at the woman who was being harassed for having the nerve to not just sit there and take it quietly. And honestly, the fact that they're closing ranks and protecting the guys who were fired tells you everything you need to know about them too. Birds of a feather and all that. If your first instinct when your coworkers get fired for sexual harassment is to blame the victim rather than be disgusted by your coworker's behavior, you're probably part of the problem. The writer says she frankly doesn't care what they think. And good! She shouldn't. These are the same men who either participated in or stood by while she was being harassed. Their opinions are worth less than nothing. They're big mad that there are consequences now, that they can't just say and do whatever they want without repercussions. The work environment being tense? Yeah, that's not on her. That's on the men who chose to sexually harass their coworker and literal teenagers. That's on the men who are now pouting because they can't be inappropriate without getting in trouble. That's on the supervisor who didn't handle it the first 2 times it was reported. The tension is a direct result of their actions, not hers. And can we talk about the audacity of being mad at someone for reporting sexual harassment? Like, the entitlement is wild. How dare you report us for making you uncomfortable and harassing teenagers? Don't you know we should be allowed to do whatever we want without consequences? That's essentially what they're saying. They're not even trying to hide it. So let me answer this question as clearly as possible. No, writer, you are absolutely not the asshole. Not even a little bit. Not even 0.01%. You are the opposite of the asshole. You did everything right. You reported through proper channels. You documented the harassment. You escalated when it wasn't handled. You literally followed the exact procedure you're supposed to follow, and you did it while being the only woman in a male-dominated environment, which takes incredible courage. Those men got themselves fired by being sexist creeps who couldn't keep their inappropriate comments to themselves. They got themselves fired by being so gross that they extended that behavior to literal high school girls. They got themselves fired by creating a hostile work environment. You didn't do any of that. You just refused to be a silent victim, and that's not being an asshole. That's being a hero. The remaining coworkers calling you a snitch, they're the assholes. The ones who got fired, definitely the assholes and possibly criminals depending on what they said to those teenage girls. The supervisor who didn't handle it the first 2 times, also an asshole for not doing his job. You know who else is grateful you reported them? Even if they can't say it, those teenage girls. Because you stopped these men from continuing to harass them. You protected them, probably without even meaning to, just by standing up for yourself. That investigation didn't just help you, it helped literal children who were being victimized by grown men in positions of authority. The work environment is tense. Let it be tense. That's the sound of a toxic workplace being forced to reckon with its toxicity. That's the sound of men who thought they could get away with anything, realizing they actually can't. That's uncomfortable for them, and it should be. And honestly, if the remaining coworkers want to whisper and give you the silent treatment, let them. They're showing you exactly who they are. They're telling you that they value male solidarity over basic respect and human decency. They're telling you that they'd rather protect predators than support victims. That's valuable information. Now you know exactly who you're working with. You're 22 years old, and you just took on an entire toxic workplace culture and won. You got predators fired. You protected yourself and others. You stood up for what was right, even when it was scary and uncomfortable, and you were completely outnumbered. That's not asshole behavior. That's superhero behavior. The fact that you're even questioning if you're the asshole shows how much this toxic environment has gotten into your head, and that makes me so mad on your behalf. They've created such a messed up culture that you're doubting yourself for reporting sexual harassment of minors. Let me say it again for the people in the back. You helped stop the sexual harassment of teenage girls. There is no universe, no timeline, no reality where that makes you an asshole. If anything, you should be proud. Your boss should be thanking you for bringing this to his attention before it became an even bigger legal nightmare for the company. Those girls' parents should be grateful, even though they probably don't know the full story. You literally made your workplace and that school safer. So no, you're not the asshole. You're the person who had the courage to speak up when it would have been easier to stay silent. You're the person who protected others at personal cost. You're the person who refused to let toxic behavior slide just to keep the peace. The remaining coworkers will either get over it or they won't. And honestly, that's their problem, not yours. You did your job and reported misconduct. They can either grow up and act professionally, or they can keep pouting about consequences like the children they apparently are. Stand tall, writer. You did the right thing, and anyone who says otherwise is telling on themselves.